Welcome to the RevOps Co-op. Today we'll be talking with Cliff Simon, and I'm super excited for this topic. It's something that all of us deal with, whether you're in analytics, systems management, anything. So we're going to be talking requirements gathering. So Cliff, why don't you give us a little background and expertise, or your expertise on the topic?
Sure. Yep. I'm Cliff Simon. I currently work for the Carabiner Group. We are a Salesforce consultancy. So requirements gathering is a lot of the name of the game. My role here is the VP of Sales and Revenue. So I head up our sales, marketing, operations, finance, and partnerships teams to make sure that we're firing on all cylinders. Yeah, I know, right?
That's a lot. That's a big job description.
Yep. I'm a certified revenue growth architect. And I've been in the SaaS space for about the last 7 years, a lot of it dealing with enterprise and mid-market sales. So requirements gathering, again, big part of that.
So before we jumped on this call, we had a quick conversation, and I really liked something you said, and that was around who should be involved in the conversation and giving requirements. So if you could give us a rundown of who you think should be included, I think it's really important for people to hear.
Yeah, I think the people that need to be involved are the people that are actually going to be dealing with the client on a day-to-day basis. For us, we're not set up like a typical SaaS company, right? We have a delivery team, which is akin to a CS team or an account management team. Those people need to be involved early, and they need to be involved often. They're the ones that are going to be building the long-term relationships with your clients. And they're the ones that are going to be able to take all of the feedback that you're getting from your clients and pushing that to the pre-sales side of the funnel, whether that's sales or marketing, to make sure that you're able to understand all of the additional impacts that your client's actually getting from your product that you guys might never have thought about before. So there's a whole bunch of alignment stuff that needs to go on there.
Okay, and so from the perspective of, let's say we have an internal CRM admin or somebody who's just starting out consulting for CRM administration, when they're gathering requirements from their client or from the internal customers, who else should be included there? Because I think I see a lot of brand new administrators only having a conversation with the executive who's really pushing down the ask.
Yeah, that gets really tough, right? A lot of the times you're catering to the people who are signing the checks and signing the contracts, and that's the executive team, usually because they want that reporting. And CRM is great for that. Specifically, we love Salesforce. But as part of our requirements gathering, we always include the front end users, whether that's the admins, people in marketing, the sales AEs, whoever's going to be using SDRs, doesn't matter. Because if they're not putting in the right information, they're not comfortable with the system, you're not going to be getting the things that you need out of it on the back end. Really good forecasting, understanding the business intelligence, understanding your deal cycle and flow. What does it look like to really keep down churn and to hold on to your clients long term? So making the system as user-friendly as possible and making sure that you have appropriate alignment between what the executive team wants and what your frontline users are actually getting out of the tool makes a big difference. So for us, we go in, we do interviews at both the frontline level and the executive level. And then we talk about it with the executive team and say, hey, this is what would drive adoption and better data for you. And then we triage it accordingly and put it into a roadmap and start building.
Yeah, and I've walked into a company where they had over 20 validation rules on their opportunity. And we had the CFO come in and say, all I want is this one field filled out. I'm only asking for this additional one field. They're being paid a salary. What are they being paid a salary for? And I'm like, it's taking 20 minutes to create an opportunity because every time they hit save, they've got an error popping up. So I think it's really important that executives, like if you can have somebody walk through the current process over Zoom and record it and show that to the executive, or actually have the executive go in and try to create an opportunity to create some empathy there. Mm-hmm. I think that's huge, because you're absolutely right. If the end users can't figure it out or aren't comfortable, or there's too many required fields, you're going to start getting garbage. So you have 20 validation rules, you're going to start seeing like these little hyphens that people put in fields that they have to fill.
Putting in nothing just so that something is there. Exactly.
Mhm.
They're going to
Mhm.
put in something for the sake of putting something in there. Now you're getting crappy data as opposed to what you thought was going to be this rich treasure trove of different line items and fields that you could sort and customize your reporting on. So
Yeah,
not good.
and as we were talking earlier, like you have this great understanding that ultimately the CRM is there so we can get enough information to give to our investors, especially
Yep.
in early stage companies. And it's absolutely key that the data that's put in there is good enough. It's never going to be perfect, but it's good enough. So, what are the first things that consultants should be thinking about as they're gathering requirements?
Yeah. So the line that we typically lead with is if it's not down on paper, we can't read your mind. Requirements require that we really understand the very granular level to which you want everything to be built out. What are all the field options that you want? Give me every single item that you want in a pick list. What's the flow? Do you want us to set it up in Sales Console so that way you can have your end users have use the wizard to see what things are required for that particular stage and keep them out of Salesforce as much as possible, right? You want them in and out as quickly as possible. Let's keep it to that.
Yeah, usability is absolutely key. This common theme we're going to be talking about as we talk about requirements gathering. And this carries over to analytics as well. So a lot of people, they think they know what they want. You have to dig into why they're asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you come up with what they really want, and you have to present it in a way that's consumable. And the same goes for any kind of input or data entry you're asking for. It has to be
Yep.
presented in a way that's really
Why is it beneficial for the end user?
yes. Yeah, what's in it for them?
If I'm a
Absolutely.
salesperson, you're asking me to put in 15 fields on an opportunity. What does that do other than just give hierarchy the ability to forecast deals better? Well, if you're putting in good data and your hierarchies, your executive team is actually looking at it the appropriate way, they're going to help you actually figure out what deals you can focus your time on
Yep.
and the ones that have a better chance to close instead of the ones that don't. So starting to look at multi-threading and making sure that you have proper engagement on an account. Now, say you're at the negotiation stage and you're a sales rep and you think something's going to close by the end of this month, but you don't have an economic buyer when
Mhm.
you typically have finance involved at this point on deals that close. So being able to look at little key things like that throughout the sales cycle can help you focus and like truly forecast properly, but also help you focus your energies on the places that you need to go and get those things.
And that brings up a wonderful point that I think more people need to trust the people, the salespeople they hire with information around why they're asking for certain things. So if the
Sure.
salesperson understands that you need an accurate forecast to be able to staff the customer success team appropriately to keep their customers happy, I mean, that's going to make some sense to them. And if they're trying to bring on huge enterprise clients, and that's going to eat up a lot of CS time, they're at risk of having an unhappy enterprise client who unhooks early. Then you lose your portion of the commissions in a clawback, and it
Oh,
just,
clawback.
yeah. So having that conversation and explaining the why behind things, like people aren't happy anymore with because that's why, because we said so.
Mm-hmm.
They really need to understand the why these days.
Because you're asking them to own it.
Yeah, yeah,
It's plain and simple.
yeah.
We're in the same position, right? While it's not spinning up more Azure or AWS for us, every time we sign a new client, and we're built similarly to a SaaS company in which we're based off of ARR. Every time we hire, or rather sign a new client, we have to hire somebody new to be able to make sure we're taking that on and we can have the bandwidth to give them the level of customer service that we know that they deserve. We have to bring on a new human being. That takes time. So we
Mhm.
need to be able to forecast that appropriately to make sure that we have a proper bench of bodies to pull from with the appropriate skill sets to meet the needs of the client. So it becomes even more critical.
Absolutely. So I've always viewed a consultant or system admin's role as kind of end user advocacy. I mentioned the story about the CFO who came in and the 20
Mhm.
validation roles. Do you agree with that?
I think that there's a fine line in the sand, right? You,
Mhm.
you have to be able to make sure that you're keeping happy the folks that are paying you. But at the same time, part of that is giving them good data. And if you can make the end users happy and get them bought into it, it makes change that much easier, right? Um, I think of a couple clients that we have right now where we're going to be making the end users incredibly happy because right now, from a reporting standpoint, right, they're pulling four full-time human beings, like 160 hours a week to just pull information out of Salesforce and put it in Excel for their reporting purposes. So we're going to be building all of that out in Tableau for them, right?
Yeah.
It's going to make them very happy because they're going to be offloading 90% of their work into Salesforce instead
Yeah.
of being super manual. So that's an end user being super happy, or in this case, for end users being super happy and being able to work on things that are more strategic and not just being hands on keyboard the entire time. And from the executive side, they're incredibly pleased because they're getting that reporting much faster. They don't have to wait a week for a report to come in for people to crunch numbers.
Yeah. And I think historically, a lot of executives have looked at analysts as the people who crunch the numbers together to make sense of them, when really the value of an analyst is being able to translate what you're seeing and come up with suggestions on how to improve the
Yep.
beginning and end of that process that
They're
impacts that
not
particular
they're not
number.
just number monkeys, right?
Yeah, yeah. Go figure.
They typically have a skill set of being able to look at the numbers and see patterns that others don't.
Yeah,
So enable them to do that and not just pay them to be a robot.
yeah, yeah. And when you free up time for them to go ask questions and chase down theories on why those numbers are like that, you'd be really surprised that they can come up with some pretty interesting ideas for fixing the issue. So,
Yeah,
yes,
no,
yeah.
for sure. Like that particular client is dealing with international transport and delivery delays and making sure that they're meeting all of their enterprise level clients' SLAs. So yeah, being able to dig deeper into the numbers and find out what's going on so that they can work with their logistic partners or try to figure out things from a financing perspective and make sure that they're getting paid on time. Like all those things factor into that and are things that they're going to get freed up to do because of this.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong in that line of business. I remember, was it a couple years ago that that big freight ship got stuck. Everything just stopped.
What
So,
was it? It was earlier this year. We had the one in the Suez Canal too,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That's not good. So, speaking of usability, there are some great tools on the market that
there are.
can really help. So, if you could talk about some that you have experience with.
Yeah, there's several out there. I'm personally a huge fan of Dooley.
Hmm.
I use it every day. My team uses it. Really great. Hooks right into Gmail. Um, your notes go directly into Salesforce. You don't have to open up multiple tabs to do opportunities, to update next steps, closing dates, amounts, etc. Right. Um, there's another one which is similar called Scratchpad.
Hmm.
Some
Yeah,
similar functionality. I haven't used it quite as much. I played around with it back when it was in beta
yeah.
before they got their Series A. Um, those are probably like my two favorite, like sort of like enablement. Um, on the engagement side, you've got your typical players of outreach, SalesLoft. There's Ample Market, and there's Outplay. All four of those have really similar functionality. They all work in slightly different ways, but again, they all have those similar kind of integrations. And now you're able to take all of those data points and make sure that they're being captured in Salesforce. Again, from a hierarchy view, when you're trying to look at the forecasting, it's really good to understand how many touch points do I need from getting a prospect to making them a qualified lead to turning that into an opportunity, so on and so forth through the opportunity cycles. Um, I know those are things that we look at internally, and I think it's starting to become the norm that a lot of companies are doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I recently had to re up my Salesforce certification, and it was the first time I was excited about new features they were rolling out in quite a while. And the fact that they now allow you to customize finally the detail layouts and actually do conditional logic to show fields when they need to be
Hmm.
filled out and hide them when they don't. Little things like that add up and make the user experience a lot
So
better.
much better.
Yeah, like the other time I was excited quite a while ago was when they rolled out paths where you can
Hmm.
actually elevate
Yep.
fields in a really easy. So they are making improvements over time. I agree, Dooley and Scratchpad are great. Scratchpad recently rolled out a new mass update feature. They've been
Okay.
rolling out quite a new bit of new features, and that one looks pretty usable from a RevOps perspective. So
Cool. I'll have to go check that out.
yeah, there's always new things coming out, and it's cool to see. So
I'd say too, like on the Salesforce side, I think there's been a lot more being done with LWC, Lightning Web Components,
yeah,
being able to actually change the UI of what people are seeing.
yeah.
We've been talking to a company recently called what is it called, Silver Fox Software. They
Mhm.
have something called Express Console, which is available on App Exchange. But what it does is it puts everything to a split view, and instead of having to open additional tabs, you just hover over the blue language, like you would a hyperlink within Salesforce, and it just pops open the next field and the next field. So if you hover over an account, it shows you all the account information. If you hover over a contact, it shows you all the contact information. So
Nice.
that's been really useful to see just the different things that people are doing out there now that Salesforce is making things more readily available from a development and a UI UX perspective.
Yeah, and Salesforce also just rolled out a split view. So you have your list view, and then it's like the old console.
Mm-hmm.
So that's coming back too, which was nice because I know that was a big loss when we moved away from Classic. Like one of the give and takes, it was a bummer, but it's back. So that's good. Um, so when we were talking ahead of time, there was another thing that came up that we is near and dear to both of our hearts and inextricably linked to any CRM project, and that's change management. Do you want to go into a little bit of the?
I would say the most important thing about change management is setting the appropriate expectations.
Yes. Yeah.
If you and the client or you and the end users are on the same page and you understand what it's going to take to get there, you'll be fine. I think the problem that often occurs is that the people that are purchasing consulting help or that are purchasing, somebody to work internally and do these things for them, don't necessarily understand the level of complexity and time that it takes. Especially that first month and a half, where it is a lot of requirements gathering and understanding. It's trying to figure out what the blueprint's going to be before you start building. And very often they're like, wait, why hasn't anything started yet? I'm like, well, you're having conversations about what you want to be built so that you're not wasting time and that the building can go appropriately. Right? You have to bring in the right contractors. You don't want to bring in a mason to do your carpentry. You don't want to bring a plumber to do your electrical work. So you got to make sure that you've got the appropriate resources in place for what the build requires. And
Yeah.
I think if you level set and align within that process, change management becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, it was funny. I love watching car restoration reality TV, and I was watching one last night, and there was this guy who had an El Camino, and he kept changing what he wanted. He wanted a vinyl top, then he wanted the top completely taken off, and finally the garage was like, "We're done. We're not working with you anymore." And I'm like, oh, "It's a Salesforce instance." Because they're like, "Yeah, this is going to take weeks," and I'm like, "Mm-hmm, mm-hmm." And then they're going to
Yeah,
change
and
their mind, and the list's going to change, and that's
the best
something.
is, yep.
Yeah,
The best is when you've got a client that comes in and they tell you, "Oh, we've been thinking about this for a while. It's the end of Q3 and we want this done by a Q1."
well, I'm glad it's been in your mind a while,
Brand new
but
instance.
yeah,
Like that, and you're merging two old instances that are 10 years old that have tons of data in them. That's probably not going to happen. You're probably going to need like 5 or 6 months because you're going to need again a month and a half to gather requirements, make sure everyone's on the same page, get agreement on the build out, everyone understands what the spec is going to be. And then you have to build it, and then you have to pull the data out and insert it, right? So you can build and clean the data simultaneously, but until everything's built out and the fields are all there, you can't map anything over. You can't dump the data into an empty database, right? So they think everything can sort of just have, oh, it's the cloud, just flick a button and it all jumps over. It's not quite how it works.
Yeah.
So again, level setting and helping them understand what something truly takes.
Yeah. Red flags for me are always people who come to the table with an exact list of exactly what they want, and they're not systems people. So they don't, yeah, it's like, no, we actually have to ask what you're trying to solve and why you're trying to solve it so we can understand the best way to put this in place so you'll get the data you want instead of a bunch of garbage. So the list people scare me, and then the other folks are the ones who change their minds a lot because, again, back to the car restoration show, he pointed out that people who want a lot of changes don't remember that they're asking for as many changes as they are, and they're always upset that the date pushes, the go live date. And I'm like, yep, there's a lot of parallels here to
Document that.
Yep.
It would probably be my number one rule there. Document everything. Make sure it's in whatever that schematic is going to be. Every time they ask for a change, make an update, note it, put a date on it, let them understand and give them in writing what that's going to look like, how that affects the build. Gosh, thinking about that car show. We've been very fortunate to not have clients that really flip flop on what they want.
Yeah.
I'm not scared of the list. I like the list because it gives me an idea of what their intentionality is. And then it's just really having a conversation.
If they're flexible, if they think they know exactly what they want and get upset when you start suggesting alternatives to make things easier on the end users, that's when the red flag really goes for me.
I don't think we've really run into that too much. So thankfully, right? It's usually this is our desired end state.
Yeah.
But they're coming to us as the experts to tell them how to build it. Like they're not architects. We are. So
no, my friend, let me tell you, I've been in this for like 15 years. It'll happen.
if you want a great room that's 30 feet long, that's awesome. We're gonna have to put a beam in, right? You need something strong enough to carry that load.
Yeah.
And if you say no to that, well, then there's not really another way to do it.
Yeah.
Right. Either you can have something that works appropriately, gets you your desired effect, or you can have something that's not going to be sustainable. Right? It's going to collapse on itself at some point. So let's build it the right way. I think if you can frame it that way, people tend to be very agreeable.
Not always, but I like that you've run into that. Usually those are the clients where I'm like, I can't in good conscience do it that way because you're going to have a lot of issues. They go have somebody else do it exactly how they want. And then inevitably they come back to me and say, no one's using what we put in place and we need to fix it. So it happens.
Sure.
And people learn and you move on. So yeah.
I mean, that's one of the key reasons why we tend to stay on long-term with our clients, right? 95% of our clients are with us for at least a year. Yeah. Because when we build something new or we make changes, we want to be able to see how that's actually being handled by the end users over a period of time. So that way we can go back and say, okay, let's make the appropriate adjustments to either drive productivity, or maybe there are some fields that we added in that leadership thought they had to have but aren't necessary anymore. So let's sunset some of that and make it more user-friendly from a UI perspective.
100%. Like that's the sustainable way to do it. That's the way. Love it. Love it. Cliff, thank you so much. Where can people find you online to network?
Oh, wow. You can find me on LinkedIn. That one's pretty straightforward. Search Cliff Simon or the LinkedIn thing and then Cliff_Simon. You can also find us at carabinergroup.com. And I'm all over Slack. So find me at RevGenius or Pavilion or RevOps Co-op, Wizards of Ops, all the fantastic ops communities that are out there. I'm pretty active in all of them. So
wonderful. Well, thank you again. And for folks looking for more content like this, check out the RevOps Co-op.